one. Bada bing, bada boom. It's Mr. Worldwide. I walk in the room. My name is Wells Forney, and we got Jackson and Grant here to bring some amazing UFC analysis to you guys for one of the most electric cards we have had in a minute. If you aren't aware, we got Nate Maness versus Jimmy Flick. Jackson, break this one down here for us. What should we be looking at this fight? I see a relatively large price discrepancy. Walk me through it.
All right, basically what we're looking at here is the 5-1 odds on Nate Maness in other markets, and the fact that he's more than a dollar cheaper than his opponent Jimmy Flick here. I personally think Jimmy Flick is kind of a bum, and Nate is like a real fighter, just like two different caliber fighters here. Jimmy is coming off a come from behind win over Malcolm Gordon, where he was losing the whole fight. He honestly looked terrible in that, and he ended up getting to a sub. He is a really aggressive grappler. Basically, his like highlight grappling finishes that he has on his resume are the only reason the UFC really keeps him around these days, or at least that's kind of the way I see it because he's been losing fights by KO. Really uneventful Malcolm Gordon fight where he did not look like the better fighter. And Nate Maness is like a real solid guy. He's got a wrestling base, but is very well rounded with good kickboxing, um, good power in his hands, very tough, 78% takedown defense. And he's coming off a knockout win over Mateus Mendonca, where he didn't even need to wrestle in that one. So I just don't think Flick is going to be able to get there. He's very one dimensional. All he can do is sub you. And Nate is a super tough guy with very high takedown defense. 5-1 in other markets. Don't overthink it. Just invest in Nate on prediction strike. Safe money.
Love to hear it. Love to hear it. Now, moving on to the big and exciting main card, we've got Brady Heiston versus Garrett Armfield. How do we see this one breaking down, Jones?
So we've got Brady at a dollar, about a dollar more expensive than Garrett Armfield. And the last time I looked at this, Garrett was at $2.04. So we've seen a tiny bit of pre-fight pump on Garrett here. And I obviously that's you have a better price if you're on the Garrett side of things than other markets. He's about a 2-1 favorite. Everywhere else, and I think for good reason. He's a very busy striker, nice jab, switches up his stance well, does a good job of coming forward while staying controlled and not taking too many risks, and does a good job of kicking the legs before coming up top. Solid takedown defense, doesn't look for offensive takedowns too often, but when he does, they seem pretty clean. It works him in well. He's coming off a decision win over Brad Katana, where he was taken down 4 times, but ended up having the volume and pressure to beat Brad. And we just saw Brad dismantle somebody at UFC St. Louis. So um, Brady is a good wrestler, pretty good at establishing positions and racking up control time. Boxing is pretty mediocre. Can definitely struggle with pressure on his feet. And Garrett Armfield is all pressure. But he has solid scramble skills, plenty of cardio to last a full fight. Coming off a win over Donat Bargari, where he was losing that fight, but got the takedown in the third round. I am not the biggest Garrett Armfield guy generally. I don't think this is the fight to fade him, though. I think just because Brady is the exact type of fighter that struggles with the type of pressure that Garrett is so used to putting forward in his fights, um, I think it's going to go his way. He's definitely going to need his takedown defense in this one, but I think it stays on the feet and Garrett racks up the striking points here.
Right on. Grant, you got anything here?
No, keep letting Jackson cook away.
All
That
right.
was
Add
We
pretty.
got
some in a bit.
Arizona State University taking on Jose Johnson. All right. Who do you like between these two fighters here?
Arizona State University. So we're getting really good prices for Asu on PS, who's another about I think 5-1 favorite. Wouldn't be surprised if that, like in other markets, gets even deeper for Asu, gets even harder to bet on. So I like the prices right off the bat on PS for Asu. I think it's a good investment. Asu, very flashy striker, dominant wrestler, good at controlling range. He has a pretty diverse arsenal of striking attacks. He works in spins and kicks and can also shoot big takedowns with good control when he gets on top. He doesn't look for submissions too often, but he can definitely snatch things up in scrambles, and he can submit you for sure. Overall, strong, sets a great pace, has plenty of cardio, had 9 takedowns in his last fight, which was a decision win over CJ Vergara, which, it means effective takedowns, no control. He had trouble to stay on top there if he had to take him down 9 times. Jose, very strong Muay Thai guy, uses his length well to control the center. Very fast, versatile striking. Does have some trips for offensive takedowns, good BJJ on the ground. I think Jose definitely long enough to give Asu some trouble. Doesn't have nearly good enough takedown defense to stop Asu. Like we saw him take down CJ Vergara, who's insanely hard to pin down, which is part of the reason why he had to take him down 9 times. But he took him down 9 times. I think he's going to easily get it to the ground with Jose Johnson, where he's not really going to have a chance against a grappler like Asu. So good price for him on PS.
What round do you think he's going to get this one done in?
I could see this. I mean, I definitely think he's going to get the takedown within the first round. So it's a matter of is Jose going to be able to fight on the ground for more than 1 round? So I would probably venture like the first or second inside the distance on this one.
All right. Sounds good. I like to hear that about Asu. I also realized that I didn't really watch the card last weekend, but my one prediction I had actually came true.
Which one was it?
What was that?
In the second
yeah.
round.
Oh, true.
Let's go.
But anyways, we got Douglas Silva de Andrade versus Miles Johns. Yeah, absolute banger here. What do you like?
Grant, what are we thinking on this?
What was John's price?
Slightly.
Yeah,
cheaper.
I mean, at that price, I'm definitely leaning Miles Johns. A pretty much consensus favorite. Has not lost in his last 3. I don't know, a guy that I feel like you can trust to know how to get a decision. He's won, I believe, 8 fights in his MMA career by decision, way more than he has knockouts or submissions. Trained in wrestling in college and definitely a talented MMA artist as well. But I more like his ability to just kind of manage fights. I don't think he's going to walk into anything too crazy. He hasn't been knocked out in 4 or 5 years. So I feel like in this situation, he's just a guy that you can trust to give a solid performance. It might not be anything crazy or flashy. You're probably not going to get that knockout bonus on PS, but I just feel like you know what you're going to get, and that's a guy you can trust to kind of go out there and fight for decision and take home a victory.
Yeah, I'm pretty much right there with you on the result, Grant. Wells, what is the right now the other markets at on this Miles Johns Douglas fight?
Johns is a favorite.
Damn. Yeah. So earlier this week, Miles Johns was actually the dog entering this fight, and I do think that's just because of the Douglas Silva's accolades. He's fought a ton of former champions in multiple different weight classes. He's also super tough. Cardio. He is like his main thing. I think even at this age, I think he's 38. He just pushes people's cardio, and Miles Johns is like kind of a little bit notoriously someone who does not have that much cardio to spare. Like he can go 15 minutes, but 15 minutes is pretty much like he's gassed after 15 minutes. And Douglas Silva notoriously pushes that cardio. So I kind of see it. I do think that Miles Johns can get it done. I do like that he's been using his wrestling a lot more in his recent fights. Like we kind of saw him take a break from his wrestling and sort of just sit behind his hands once he found a little bit of power in his hands for a few fights. But it looks like he's getting back to that wrestling, which is something that I think is going to be important against a guy like Douglas. He is the younger, much faster, likely more well-rounded fighter, but still was a dog at one point just because of how durable Douglas is. So he's not someone you want to underestimate. I think, like I said, with the whole cardio situation, it's important for Miles to really establish that control time early, make things happen in the first couple of rounds, because he will gas eventually. But I do think he'll probably squeeze out a decision. Don't think this ends inside the distance just because of how durable Douglas Silva is, I think it probably goes all the way.
So in these decision wins that he's had throughout his career, is he usually stacking up points, going up 2-0, and then losing the third?
Yeah. I mean, he's just he fades into fights, much more explosive in the earlier rounds.
Fair enough. That seems like usually the kind of fight you see from a knockout artist. It's different with a guy who's eking fights out by decision.
Yeah.
But starting in the next fight, we have Lucas Almeida versus Timmy. Is it Kwamba?
Yeah.
I do like Kwamba in this one. I believe we covered his last fight. It was on that Piper card. He did lose. It was his UFC debut, but before that, obviously showed a lot of promise through the Contender Series and just a large career in mixed martial arts, dating back to 2018. He's only 24, so or 25, so been fighting since he was like 18. Definitely dedicated to the sport. This feels like a spot where you can kind of shake off the rust from the first fight, little nerves going into your debut in the biggest fighting company in the world, and come back and kind of put together a real performance. And this feels like a spot where I feel like he's going to take this one.
I'm going to have to disagree. It doesn't really make sense from a PS standpoint at all, or a price standpoint, because I know that Timmy is the favorite in most markets, but is the dog here. So a ton of inherent value on the Kuwamba side of things, just off the bat. But I do think this is going to be a striker versus striker matchup. I mean, it is a striker versus striker matchup. And if Kuwamba was like a good wrestler, I would definitely understand like the Timmy side. But I do think Almeida is ultimately the better striker between the two. He's a super powerful guy, throws heavy 1-2s, has just a huge right hand, really good at noticing when his opponent's in trouble and just coming forward, dropping his hands, and winning however he can. Only 40% takedown defense, which is why I'm kind of like, if it was a wrestler, I would understand, but that's not Timmy Kuwamba. He is coming off a knockout loss to Andre Fili. Looked pretty good before that, though. And Timmy, also a striker, good takedown defense, not going to be important here against Almeida. Fast hands, not really anywhere near the same type of power as Lucas Almeida. But yeah, he definitely isn't a killer. Lucas Almeida is someone I would consider a killer here. I think he's the better striker. Seems like some recency bias, making Timmy the 2-1 favorite in most markets here, which is something I like.
Yeah, bounce back spot is definitely a little enticing. I think if you're investing on PS, Timmy is probably the side you're going to have to play. And if you're looking at it on a consensus side, he doesn't really feel like he's worth the -200. So you're probably backing a different side depending on how you want to play this one. But both of those sides are a little appealing in this one for sure.
So for this fight, are we looking for it to go the distance on this one, or do we think that one of these gentlemen is getting it done in 2.5 rounds here?
I think it probably ends inside the distance.
I think probably, yeah.
All right. So it looks like we got an absolute banger there. I will say the next one, just don't overthink it. This guy's going to get a submission in the first 30 seconds.
Yeah, I would agree.
You got him going up to Tanya Tripoli.
I mean, he's a 10-1 favorite. Like, do we really need to break this one down?
Yeah, like the only reason I'm saying so is because it's like, if you really want to think about it, it's like, okay, he's probably not going to go a striking match because this guy right here, he's 6'5", has a 6-inch like arm advantage.
Yeah,
make him dumb, beat him dumb, submit him, game over.
Yeah, and it's like Trockley is coming back after the USADA thing and 3 years away. I just don't see it.
Yeah, there's just no way with that fight. But I know Jackson saw some interesting value in this next fight here, so I'll let him lead off with the guy that he's touting a little bit. So walk us through the main event of this fight.
Okay, so the sad thing is, which I was pained to see because I made my picks before looking at any of the prices on PS, just so I'm not biased in any way, like before going into it. And I was so sad to see that Taira and Perez were kind of opposite of other markets, and Taira is
agree.
the heavy underdog on PS because I think I'm going to go with my boy Alex Perez in this one, even though you're getting such good value on the favorite and like someone I would consider one of the best prospects in the world right now in Tatsuro Taira. Perez, he's fought more in the last 3 months than he has in the past 3 years, and he's looked really, really good. Solid striker, good low kicks, good wrestling. Goes into the pocket with nice combos, then finishes those exchanges by, hitting your legs, then circling back out, doing the same thing again. Averages about 2 takedowns a fight, impressive 82% takedown defense, coming off a knockout win over Mateus Nicolau in a short notice main event spot. Tatsuro, undefeated in the UFC, one of the best flyweight prospects out there. He's only 24, but he has 15 fights on his resume with 12 finishes. Style-wise, very patient striker, very strong grappler. Doesn't have the best takedowns, I wouldn't say, but he's very persistent, will stick with it, drag you down. Coming off of his first standing knockout win ever in the UFC. Good showing against Mohamed Mokaev. He scrambled pretty well there, but didn't shoot enough to beat him. This is Perez, by the way, sorry. Had a quick turnaround fight to knock out Nicolau after that, which I was impressed by. A couple short notice bouts where he just looked really in form after a long time away. Alex, better striker in this matchup 100% of the time. We saw that in the Mokaev fight. He can genuinely defend those takedowns. And Tatsuro, not as convinced by his takedown that he shoots as I am with his grappling skills and just his overall strength and pressure.
All right. Well.
Yeah, I feel like on PS, Taira is just a must invest in guy, though.
Yeah.
It feels pretty risk-free. Yeah, even if you lose this one, with the amount of potential that you touched on him having, it just feels like that price is almost impossible. It stays that low if you were to revisit it in a year, even if he loses this fight. He'll obviously keep getting fights and 1 or 2 wins, and he'll be right back above this number. So to me, that's one you hold for years. I feel like you're in a great spot here. Probably borderline one of the best investments in the entire UFC on the app. It does feel like this one that Perez is in a good spot. He's kind of built up momentum in the last 2 fights. This will be his 3rd fight in the last 3 months, I believe, which is weird. You just never really see that. I wouldn't expect fatigue to really be an issue. He got through his potential 5-round fight in midway through the 2nd round, so it feels like he shouldn't be too gassed. Didn't really take much damage in that fight. I wouldn't really expect that to play much of a factor. Definitely maybe a shorter camp than you would expect, I guess, considering he's trained for 3 fighters with 3 different expertise levels in the last few months. So, I mean, I feel like this one could literally go either way. On PS, I would take the value on Taira, and I think if you were looking at it elsewhere, the Perez value is hard to ignore as well. So it's kind of like the fight we talked about 2 fights ago. 2 different ways to approach it.
Yeah.
Agree.
It's going to be a fun card, realistically. Got some really fun talent, specifically the last 2 fights here. I'm a big fan of Tatsuro Taira. He's a very intriguing prospect to me. And Ikram Aliskerov is going to be fighting for a title one day. So always fun to keep an eye on these guys. With that said, you get us back next week, once again, to talk through some more UFC. Not International Fight Week just yet, but we're getting closer and closer to that.
Maybe we'll get UFC 303 at some point too.
Yeah, maybe we'll get that. We'll see. But with that said, appreciate you guys. We're going to get out of here, talk some ball. It's Wednesday. My projection is that Derek Lively has a massive game, but that's really all I have for that.
This could age well.
We'll see. It's either going to age like wine or mold, one of the two. So we'll see. I appreciate you. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. We'll be back to yapping on here a little bit next week so we can tell you who's the best players to invest in. Until next time, peace, y'all.
Peace.